Hey guys, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. It's me, Steven. Today is September 11th, 2021. It's mind-boggling that it's been 21 years since 9/11. And I'm not quite sure why I'm filming this video, other than the fact that my channel has always been just sort of a little bit of a therapy session for me anyway. So this video might just be me sort of sharing my experience that day to kind of get it out of my system a little bit today. I've been watching a lot of documentaries lately, the past week or so, with this anniversary coming up. It's a big one. It's everywhere you look. Spike Lee's documentary on HBO was just heartrending. I just watched another one this morning while I was lying in bed. It was a documentary filmed from the point of view of the news broadcasters of the day and in New York, and the people who were on the ground, looking up at the tower as it was collapsing. So I figured I'd make a video about my experience, and maybe it'll make the day easier. I don't know. This year, in the past couple of years, but this year, it's the 20th anniversary, and I'm a flight attendant. Understanding the layout of that aircraft now, and knowing where they were, where they sat, what their jobs were, understanding what the protocol was. If a plane was hijacked, back then, the goal was to make sure that the hijackers were comfortable and happy. Have they had a snack? Have they eaten? Are they comfortable? Try to make them as, be as passive as possible in face of these hijackers. That was the law of the land back then. Now it's beat them up at any cost, stop them at any cost. But back then, it was, keep everybody calm. And so as a flight attendant now on this anniversary, I tragically enough feel I understand a little bit of, I can't even imagine what they were going through, but I imagine what that experience must have been like. I can try and put myself in their shoes, and it's awful. It's awful. Flying on September 11th hasn't been difficult over the past few years. This is the first year since I've been flying that I haven't flown on 9/11. In past years, I've been too busy to really honestly think about it until you're already up in the air. And when you're in the air on September 11th, honestly, it's different. Security is so much more intense. Everyone is scrutinized, from the soles of their feet to the top of their head. No one's allowed to bring stuff on board, although occasionally weapons do get through. But it's a much safer time to be on an aircraft. So nothing like that's going to happen again, I don't imagine. So working on 9/11 hasn't always been difficult, but today, the 20th anniversary just feels volatile all over again for some reason. But so my experience with September 11th it started actually on Monday the 10th. I was working at Neiman Marcus. I was on the first floor, probably in menswear somewhere. I had a client who I've been working with for a while who wanted to see some jewelry in fine jewelry. Now, I did not have access to the keys back then. They were under tight security. So I was able to borrow a jewelry key because they trusted me. I had to work with a person up in fine jewelry so they could help me out. Otherwise, this could have turned into Ocean's 11, But I don't think they bought anything that day. But the mistake I made was in leaving the key in my pocket. I kept the jewelry case key in my pocket, and that was a big, giant mistake. It was kind of the equivalent of blowing a slide on an aircraft. It was a very secure department, but having that key unsecure was just dangerous. So I left the store with the key in my pocket, which is like the biggest mistake I could have made, according to the store, policies. Well, I know my first stop, my only stop, would have been to the wine emporium on the corner of Dartmouth and Tremont, if you know the area. And I stopped in there and I got myself a 12-pack of natural ice and beer. And I got a handle of Southern Comfort. Yeah, that big giant bottle of Southern Comfort. Drank a couple beers on the way home, as was my custom. Threw the bottle in the freezer, put the rest of the cans in the fridge, and then quietly got drunk. I don't remember the rest of the night. Um, the next morning, September 11th, I woke up startled as if from a nightmare. I realized I had forgotten the key to return that key to work, and it was very important that they have it. So we opened at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I figured it was imperative that I return that key before the store opened. It was terribly important that they had that key. So I threw on whatever clothes I had. It was a pair of ridiculously short, you wouldn't believe how short, pair of denim cutoffs. They were short, Daisy Dukes, kind of. It was what we wore to the bars back then. A white T-shirt with an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe on the front is my favorite T-shirt. Hair, I have no idea what was going on with it. I had hair back then. I don't know what I wore on my feet, but I remember grabbing my house keys, the jewelry key, and my Discman. Walkman. You've heard of Walkmans before, like portable tape cassette players. Well, these were portable CD players. You literally had a physical CD. You'd put it in the machine, play, and listen to music. But the disc would skip when I walked, so it wasn't a great CD player. So I turned the radio on, and I'm walking to work with the radio on, and I don't know exactly what time it was. It must have been about 9:15, 10 of 9. But the news broadcast came on. There was an announcement, and there was something about the World Trade Center, something about New York. I don't quite remember what it was, but there was a gravity to the sound of the announcement, and sort of like when you're lying in bed, cozy, snuggling, and you're woken up because there was a strange noise in the house, a threatening noise in the house. And that moment of, what was that? That moment happened. And I'm like, wow, okay. And so I remember I slowed down walking, my nose is just, and they made some sort of announcement, and they're speculating on what happened. Apparently they thought there was a small aircraft, like a Cessna or something, that went into the side of a building in New York. And the more information they had, they were talking, and I forgot exactly what they were talking about, but it became pretty clear that something serious had happened at the World Trade Center in New York. So I'm walking to work, and I'm just about at the store when the second plane hit the second tower. And at this point, they saw it happening. It was a jet, a passenger liner crashing into the second tower. And then I guess they were piecing together that these were two passenger airlines that hit the World Trade Center, and this was clearly a terrorist act. And I'm standing there on Dartmouth just before I get to the Copley Place Mall, and I'm staring at the bricks on the sidewalk there, and I'm just thinking, this is the end of the world. This is when World War III starts. I've been waiting for World War III to start since the Reagan years. I just knew that I was going to live to see World War III, just the way that politics were at the time. And politics were even scarier than they were back then. But I knew that this is the beginning of a war. And I was terrified, and it was like the end of the world. That's exactly what I was afraid of. And I remember looking around at me, because it was a very, very busy morning. I remember looking around, and there's all these people walking around Copley Plaza, and I'm like, and they're oblivious. They don't know what's going on. And I'm standing there thinking, this is the beginning of the end of the world, and you guys don't know anything. And I was just like in shock, in awe and terror. And I'm standing there feeling like, I don't know, it was surreal. I walked up into Copley, into the employee area for Neiman's, and I walked up to security, and I gave them the key. They weren't listening to the radio. They're getting ready to open the store for the day. And I said, you need to listen to the radio or turn the radio, or if you have a TV or something. So if somebody had a radio or they had a computer and they turned on the computer and they could hear and see bits and pieces. The internet wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, of course. And nothing was really digital at the time, but they were getting information that the second plane had crashed into the tower, and we're all standing there and talking and silent and talking, and I can't even explain the sense of numbness that floods over you, and then not knowing, and then this need to know what's going on, So I make my way up the escalator. It's a long, long escalator in the first floor to the second floor, up into jewelry. I walk over to cosmetics, where I worked for years, and I see some of my coworkers up there, and I'm like, do you guys know what's going on? And someone had a radio. I don't know where they had a radio. They put the radio on, and we're all listening to the radio. And looking back, I can see it's almost like it must have been like the people who were listening to the original War of the Worlds broadcast, like people surrounding the only way of knowing what's going on, their radio. And so we're all listening intently, and chatter's going on, and we're all confused. I think it's around this time that the building starts to evacuate. People start leaving the building that we're in. The Coppola Place Mall has a number of taller buildings attached, and the building was just flooding with people. They were just leaving. And at 10 o'clock, I don't know why, the decision was made that we would open our doors. But at 10 o'clock, the door starts opening, which is like a big grate rises up from cosmetics that's facing the rest of the mall. So it's 10 o'clock in the morning. The buildings are evacuating. And I'm standing there in cosmetics behind the Laura Mercier counter. Now, I have no right being behind the counter. I'm not working. I'm not in uniform. In fact, I am the opposite. I'm wearing this like club outfit, right? I'm standing behind the counter, and these two women approach the counter, and they're looking at the products, and they're both looking for a foundation. They both want to buy a bottle of foundation. And I said, do you know what's going on? And they go, yeah, if the world's going to end, we want to look good, or something like that, some joke. And I turned and I said, and not that I could help them anyway. I was wearing a pair of hot pants, at work at Neiman's. And I said, I can't help you. And maybe you can help them. It was just, I think her name is Amy. And so these women were going to buy foundation, and I was so disgusted with them instantly. It was around that time that the first building collapsed. The first tower collapsed. And I don't remember the sequence of what happened at the time, but then the second building collapsed. And I still have my headphones on. And, they can give us only so much information. There's so much speculation as to what's going on. And I finally make my way home, and I sit down at my computer at almost the exact desk. It's an IKEA white table desk here. And I sit down at my computer, and I'm trying to find as much as I can from the internet. And there's bits and pieces being shown. Again, this is 2001. Nothing's digital. Like, there's no like instant internet from your devices. And bits and pieces are coming through. And I just spent the rest of the day there sitting, watching, and listening. And this sense of dread, I was numb. And so I pulled out this big plastic pink tumbler, and I filled it with, it held almost 3 full cans of beer. I sat there and I started drinking my beer, and I drank 3 of those, which is 9 beers. And then I opened up my Southern Comfort and started drinking a giant tumbler full of Southern Comfort. That was my normal behavior anyway. If you've watched my video, I'm a recovering alcoholic. But I got drunk. I don't really remember that night. My roommate came home from work, and the next night, I think the next night, there was a candlelight vigil happening in Copley Plaza. And I mean, we're all in a fog. We all have no idea what's going on. And all I keep getting now, finally, there are images online. There's news broadcasts of what's going on and what happened in New York. And the trauma is so much. I'm so drunk. I'm drunk the whole time. They're having a candlelight vigil down in Copley Plaza. It's me, Adam, my roommate, and Michael, his friend Michael, who's the only person I could meet who could drink more than I could. But we all made to-go cocktails in these big styrofoam cups with lids, like big disposable coffee cups. We made cocktails and took them with us to the candlelight vigil. And so everyone's walking around in Copley, and I don't know how many people were there, hundreds. It felt like the whole plaza was filled, but there were hundreds of people at least. And we're all breaking into these big circles. Everyone's in a circle, and we're all singing America the Beautiful. We're all singing the national anthem. We're all singing patriotic songs and crying and swaying, and it's this emotional discharge. It was like a lightning strike of emotion. It was so intense. There's hundreds of people weeping and crying and mourning. And, again, we're from Boston, where all these planes came from. So some of these people had, real connections to the passengers on the plane, the people who work for the aircraft, the airlines. And there's all this emotion, and they're weeping and gnashing of their teeth, and they're singing these patriotic, and I'm singing this, all these songs, and I'm crying as I'm doing it with my alcohol in my hand, of course. And this is this is something I never would have admitted to anybody before this point in my life, because I was deeply ashamed of my reaction to this experience with the circles and the singing and the hugging. I was at one point crying so hard, and I can feel how hard I was crying. I remember my throat was just constricting with these tears and this agony. Everyone around me was feeling so deeply, and I was numb. I was numb. I was completely numb. I was watching these circles of people singing and swaying and crying, and I was feeling this sense of numbness. I was almost immune to the pain that everyone around me was feeling, and that made me upset. The fact that I felt disconnected emotionally and physically and spiritually from all of these people who were having the same common reaction of fear and anger and loss. I felt completely disconnected from this, and that I was somehow missing something vital in my soul. And that is what got me upset. And that is what had me crying so hard. Does that make any sense? And I'm ashamed to say it today. Well, I'm better, because clearly I'm saying it now. I was ashamed for many years about my reaction to this candlelight vigil, because I wasn't even human. I wasn't even a human being. I was disconnected from a human race completely. And I don't know if that was via my alcoholism, on top of any other sense of disconnection I've naturally always felt, but I was completely isolated amongst this sea of emotions, and I was crying, and I was jealous of these people who could emote and feel. And this woman, this poor woman, young woman, I don't remember what she looked like. She had long hair. She walked up to me and embraced me, because in her eyes, I was feeling what she was feeling, this sense of loss and anger and fear. And I was someone who needed a hug. And I didn't. In fact, because I don't know if you know well, if you've heard me say this before, but my safe place for many, many, many years was rage and isolation. And my reaction to her embracing me was for me to drop my cup, both hands, forcefully push her away and say, "Get the F off of me," I screamed. I don't even remember her reaction because I couldn't have cared. I'm a rotten person. Um, yeah, so that's how I handled the candlelight vigil. And I honestly don't remember much for the next couple of days because I was probably on a serious drunk. I know I had to go to work at some point, but I was drunk there too. I wasn't sober for probably a week, and I don't really remember much else. But you know, as that week progressed and the weeks and months that followed, more and more was understood and known as to what happened at the time. Years later, and I don't remember when exactly. It was before the tower was completed, the Freedom Tower, but the museum and all that stuff hadn't opened yet. But they had the reflecting pools built. I was in New York, and I went to those reflecting pools. And at this point, I was sober. I had been sober for a couple of years at least, um, and that is where I cried, and that is where I um, got emotional and fear and all of the feelings I wish I had had at that um, candlelight ceremony the day after. What everyone else had been feeling that night, I felt then. Years later, it was years later, but that's when I fell apart standing at those reflecting pools. And people around me at this point, if you haven't been, there were people taking selfies. There were people just wandering around as if this was not a sacred space. And I became enraged at these people who were treating this space so just dismissively, you know, as if it were any other landmark. Because all that emotion finally showed up like the end of a train wreck, you know. It was just awful, but I was also glad because it was proof that I was maybe becoming a human being eventually, you know. But yeah, so every year 9/11, the anniversary is emotional, and I definitely watch way too many YouTube videos on the topic. So right now I feel like I know like moment by moment what happened. But the big one is having been able to piece together what those flight attendants and passengers may have gone through. The passengers on Flight 93, I think it is, that fought back, you know. Um, that's where I kind of lose, I don't know, it's emotional. Just being able to sort of piece together what may or may not have happened, you know, in my imagination. But so that is my story about my experience in 9/11. Um, yeah, not not it does not paint me in a very bright light, but eventually I have come around to be trying to be a good human being. I cry far too easily and I feel far too much far too often, but it's taken me 19 years to get to this point. I'm grateful, and maybe I'm grateful that back then I couldn't express those emotions because I would have lost myself. I think I would have lost myself. But blah, blah, blah. How was that therapy session for you? So now I am going to take a break from talking, eat something, and give my cats a little hug. Sit down and say a couple. You know, I don't pray a lot, but sit down and pray a little bit for the people who were lost and the people who continue to be affected by this date. And if you're one of those people, I'm sorry for your loss, or I'm sorry that we're feeling this together, but we're feeling it together, right? All right, blah, 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 blah. If I can keep on talking, I will talk to you guys later. Fly safe.